You got to go through that warrior phase, and I've got to fight the dragon. I've got to cut its head off, walk over its corpse, and enter into the kingdom. Because if I can't guard my own innocence, how can I guard the innocence of those that have been entrusted to me? That just opened my eyes to what chastity actually was, not kind of a list of repressive rules that the church imposes on us, these medieval restrictions that are prudish and restrictive, but rather a virtue that frees you to love, frees you to know if you're being loved. And I know these temptations are strong, but what could possibly be stronger than the desire to lust after a woman is the desire to actually love one.
Are you addicted to corn? And now I'm not talking about the vegetable, but are you using it to numb deeper rooted issues in your life? Hey everyone, Erik here, and in this episode, you're going to hear some tough topics being discussed. Not only how millions of men and women are struggling with their addiction, but to many of life's trappings. We'll explore how prayer outworks hustle, how to build connection versus an addiction, and how men often use corn as a binkie to soothe themselves when they're stressed. I for sure have experienced this during the majority of my life, and breaking free of that bondage of an addiction that I didn't realize was an addiction is a work in progress. And I am currently winning in this battle, I'm happy to say. If you manage to make it into the deep end for our burner bliss portion of the show, Jason and I cover topics like swimsuit pics on your profile, opposite sex DMs after you're already married, and we get his hot take on that Coldplay couple. So without further ado, let's get into this episode with Chastity.com founder and true inspiration for our youth on how to grow and be better young adults, Jason Evert. Welcome back, folks, to another episode of Be Your Brand to Glorify God. I'm so happy that you are here. I am feeling so blessed to be in the room, the virtual space here with Jason Evert. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. I am so excited and jazzed that we're going to have this conversation here and potentially inspire, shed some light on the topics that you are the foremost expert in. And I'm hoping that the audience will begin to reach out to you. Chastity.com is a good place for them to find you, to engage. But we'll get into all of that stuff. And I wanted to jump in with the question that basically starts at painting the picture for us in your early work and what happened that inspired you to create Chastity, the Chastity Project.
Well, during college, I led a lot of high school retreats, and the kids would really open up to me about the stuff they were going through. And, it was heavy stuff, and it really was clear they had no direction or formation when it came to human love and relationships. At the same time, I was doing 3 years of sidewalk counseling, so basically crisis pregnancy counseling for women who were contemplating abortion, giving them different options of financial support or whatever. But I felt late after a while. Like, why am I meeting these women and they're having an abortion in 45 minutes? Like, why couldn't I have met them when they were 15? Because maybe if they learned about chastity then, they never would have been in this relationship in this difficult situation today. So it felt like I was kind of throwing sandbags on the banks of a flooded river when there was a dam broken a quarter mile upstream. So I could spend the rest of my days there trying to deal with the supply of abortion. Well, no one's really paying attention to the demand for it, which is on chastity. And so I realized you're going to save a lot more unborn babies by kind of swimming upstream and dealing with the cause of it, which is on chastity. At the same time, I was reading the writings of Karol Wojtyla, who became John Paul II, a book he wrote called Love and Responsibility. And, that just opened my eyes to what chastity actually was, not kind of a list of repressive rules that the church imposes on us, these medieval restrictions that are prudish and restrictive, but rather a virtue that frees you to love, frees you to know if you're being loved. So I started sharing that with these high school kids, and you just see the light go on, and they loved it. And they realized, like, wow, this is what I'm made for, the demands of authentic human love. And so I started speaking to the high school kids, and it really snowballed from there to now, 26 years later, spoken to probably more than 2 million kids on 6 continents, and probably given the chastity talk, getting close to, 4,000 times now. And just learned a lot, from the struggles these young people are going through, but that their hearts are made for love and their minds are made for the truth, and chastity kind of offers them both.
Yeah, no, we're blessed to have you speaking about this. There aren't many. If you Google chastity speaker, you're the only guy that comes up. So
Not the
definitely
most
on the
popular
space.
profession. Yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly. And you've shared so many cool stories, funny stories about you show up at a high school and people look at you and they're like, yeah, you're not wanted here.
Yeah.
What are you doing here? And they end up loving you at the end. Before we get into sort of that sort of experience that you have, I am curious, and I asked you a little bit offline. How do you balance, 8 kids, your wife, and your relationship, and at the same time have a global ministry?
Yeah, well, today, I wake up before anybody wakes up in the family, and I get off to mass and I get to church. And after mass, I had time of Eucharistic adoration. And after prayer time, I hit the gym, had a, really good 1 hour solid workout, and then get home and you walk in the door and the kid's like, oh, I just got up 10 minutes ago. And it's like, okay, great. Like I packed in kind of that me time, that me time for God and me, that me time that I need to just feel like, hey, I had a good workout. My mind is clear. My body feels fresh. And now I can really dive into the day. So it really begins with just having that time with God and not waiting for that time to happen, but carving that out of the schedule. And then, tomorrow I've got a daddy day with my 19-year-old heading off to college. We're going to go surfing in Arizona. There's a big new surf park that opened. You got to carve that time out. And the next night is not night carved out for a date night with my wife. And so I think a lot of intentionality instead of just kind of letting the day hit you as it will. Like in the summers, I carve out daddy days with the kids, where just one day and the kid gets to just pick whatever he wants to do with dad all day. We'll have a meal, we'll go do some fun stuff together, but you can't wait for the days to happen or they'll just never happen. And so I would say the key is just intentionality and making sure we're taking care of ourselves in terms of, how much am I getting enough sleep? Am I getting enough exercise? Am I getting enough prayer? Like just living a balanced life instead of trying to live an angelic one where I'm not really taking care of my body, but I expect my soul to function perfectly. That's not even human.
You bring up a good point. Getting into the habit of waking up early before everyone and starting your day, especially in prayer. How did you begin to establish what most people have developed as a habit, myself included, which I'm just always working on? Waking up and not being distracted by the phone and all the billion different messages that you're receiving and just going straight to the Bible or going straight to a message of positivity. How did you work that in, and what advice do you have for us?
The college I went to is called Franciscan University. It's in Steubenville, Ohio. Years before I got there, it was ranked among the top 10 party schools in America, according to Playboy magazine.
Wow.
And then a priest by the name of Father Michael Scanlon, who was just a living saint, took over the reins. And this man would spend 4 hours every morning in prayer before touching work. In fact, he wouldn't do anything until he knew that is what God wanted him to do. And he turned that place into an absolute epicenter of evangelization. There's no way he could have accomplished more in 4 hours of administrative tasks than he could have in his interior life. In fact, I remember one priest saying once that hyperactivity in the apostolic life is a sign of spiritual laziness. And it was like, ooh, that one stings. That sometimes we get so addicted to the fruit of our own hands of work, do, because we're honestly too lazy to just be and to trust that God is the one who could accomplish more in our solitude and our intimacy with him than we could ever accomplish on our own. There was a saint, St. John of the Cross. I've got the quote right here hanging. I'll pull it off the wall. I've got it hanging next to my desk, but let me just read this to you, because this is just, as my teenager would say, this is fire. He said, let those then who are singularly active, who think that they can win the world with their preaching and exterior works, observe here that they would profit the church and please God much more, not to mention the good example they would give, were they to spend at least half of this time with God in prayer. They would then certainly accomplish more and with less labor by one work than they otherwise would by 1,000. For through their prayer, they would merit this result and themselves be spiritually strengthened. Without prayer, they would do a great deal of hammering, but accomplish little and sometimes nothing, and even at other times cause harm. St. John of the Cross. So it's just a real gut check that the interior life needs to take primacy over the exterior life.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, thanks for that quote. Yeah, it's all seasonal, right? We get busy, we have some time of reprieve and rest. What happens when you are in a season of you missed a day, or is it possible where you missed a day of deep prayer and then these things start to stack? Like what happens in those moments and how do you get back to it?
Yeah, I mean, it does happen for sure, especially with like 8 kids. I mean, your schedule can just go bonkers. But to try to realize, like, don't give into the spirit of discouragement. There was a saint who said that you should really fight to keep your peace because the devil always likes to fish in troubled waters. And it was just a powerful quote that, like, yeah, where the waters are troubled and my spirit is restless, that's where the devil wants to get in with false consolations, temptations, or whatever. And so I remember years ago, there was a Dwayne Wade basketball commercial. I think it was Adidas or Reebok or something, where it was like, fall down 7 times, get up 8. That's just what the Christian life is. Just keep getting up, just keep fighting. And not every day is going to be this ecstatic, spiritual, deep union with God. I remember someone once asked Mother Teresa, like, when was the last time you had a beautiful spiritual experience with God? And she's like, I can't even remember the last time. It's been at least 40 years. It was Mother Teresa. So she wasn't like living off the fumes of like these spiritually intense mystical experiences. It was a dark night for her, but she understood that by caring for the poor, by carving out that time of prayer, it's not about what she feels during those times. It's just making herself available to God and trusting that he'll do the work.
So you speak to a lot of the youth. You get them now at an earlier stage in life, hopefully. Man, what a blessing that you were able to discern and get that divine thought to meet them where they're at before the abortion clinic. One of the biggest topics that I imagine is discussed is pornography, avoiding it and the addiction of it. How do you approach that with the boys and the girls, and how it affects their love for one another?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you point that out because it's not just the guys struggling with this stuff. I mean, maybe that was the case 20 years ago, but I mean, things have shifted. And girls, I mean, it astonishes me how open they are coming to me. Yeah, I'm addicted to this, and sometimes they find their dad's and then his addiction becomes hers. Other times they find the dad's collection and it's so abhorrent to her that she like declares herself asexual. Like, wow, like my dad is lusting after girls who are 2 years older than I am. Why my mom's sleeping in the next room? Like, it just creeps me out when my dad even hugs me now. Like, it's just this poor broken-hearted girl who feels like the one guy that could love her and she could be safe in his arms. She just doesn't even feel safe under his own gaze. And so, for the father, what the point is, I mean, it's a pretty blunt analogy, but it's a spiritual vasectomy. I mean, your capacity to transmit the supernatural life to your family is severed from you, because if I can't guard my own innocence, how can I guard the innocence of those that have been entrusted to me? And so what I try to explain when I talk, to the young guys about this is that you've been created for love. And I know these temptations are strong, but what could possibly be stronger than the desire to lust after a woman is the desire to actually love one? Because porn is not what you ultimately want. It's like standing outside of the window of a restaurant, looking in, thinking you're going to somehow get fed. And the reason the porn industry even exists isn't because it shows so much of women, because it shows so little of them. If you actually zoomed out and saw the whole woman, okay, when did she get into that industry? Well, she was raped when she was 16, and then she kind of lost her self-respect, and now she's a single mom, and she's doing if you actually saw what was going on. I know one woman who said, I had to leave the industry after the 4th abortion. It just became too much for my heart. And it's like, whoa, like imagine if you could rewind her life to that scene, let's say, where she was conceiving a human life that would then be aborted 4 weeks later in some abortion clinic. And that was what you were rejoicing looking at on the internet. Like you saw the full picture of woman, the whole industry of porn would just collapse overnight. That's why they have to crop in on the woman just to the body parts. Because if you saw the whole person and your responsibility to love for her and fight for her dignity, I mean, porn would implode. And so what I try to do, as strange as it sounds, is like, isn't showing enough of the woman. And so we need to show more of the woman than porn does to help guys realize and rediscover their call to not conquer women for the sake of themselves, but to conquer themselves for the sake of the woman.
Oh, I love that. Man, I've heard you say a lot on this topic and other topics. I wish we had more time to get into gender stuff, but I want to focus on this topic because it's so near and dear to me. I have two little girls, and when I Jesus found me, and there was more in my faith, and I was like, I have to be better at this and break from the bondage of this. I would call it, I guess, an addiction, but I've known people, it's all relative to, right? Some people multiple times a day. Yeah. If it was once a week for me, that was a lot. Yeah. I've heard you say something really powerful, that you read or saw a billboard at an abortion clinic or for an abortion clinic that said that giving birth is the mother of all nightmares. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you speaking to the young folks and reframing that lens. Yeah. Okay, can you talk about that? Like, how do you shift their mindset?
Yeah, I remember that. That was a contraceptive ad, and it called "Pregnancy, the Mother of All Nightmares." And it's like, holy cow! Like, okay, well, if we're treating pregnancy like a disease, birth control becomes a vaccination, and abortion becomes the cure. It's such a twisted way of looking at the gift of human life that the next time you should flip over a pregnancy test, it should be a moment of rejoicing, where you're sitting behind your spouse like, it's positive, and you're screaming and you want to know, how are we going to surprise your mom and my dad? Like, it should be a moment of rejoicing. And if you're living out your sexuality in such a way that you can't rejoice in the natural fruit of lovemaking, something's off. The solution isn't to sterilize our acts of intercourse so we can live contrary to the way our own body. I mean, we're fighting against nature. The question is like, why am I treating fertility like a disease? Why am I needing to sterilize myself with synthetic sex hormones or barriers or blockades? Like, something's off here. I mean, if you have to protect yourself at the most vulnerable moment of self-giving love, something's off. I mean, you protect yourself from enemies, from Al-Qaeda, from drug cartels. Like, you shouldn't have to protect yourself from your lover. And if you do, something's off.
I have something really exciting to share with you. My book, Be Your Brand to Glorify God, is officially available. Why this book? Why this book now? Why do you need it? It was the book that I was searching for when I was building my business and I was beginning my walk and then eventually my run into faith. And it was the guide that I wish I had during that time. Something to give me strength, confidence, and clarity to keep showing up, creating content, sharing my experiences at the time. It offers stories and biblical principles to support you as you build your business, your personal brand. You want to make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons. And spoiler alert, it's not about you. It's not about me. Even though it's called personal branding, it's something much, much bigger. And that's what I needed. That was the clarity that I was searching for. And it's in this book. So if you're a Christian entrepreneur who's on your faith journey and you're ready to stop hiding or being afraid to share your faith, this book is for you. So grab it now on Amazon or head to beyourbrandnow.com, where you'll get the book and a free download called Know Your Roots to help you define your core values, which is the first step in building a clear and powerful personal brand. So pick up your copy today and remember to leave a rating and review to help others like you find it when they need it. I want to go back to the addiction to I've heard you say, you said something that was profound for me. And I was like, oh, wow, this is like Alcoholics Anonymous. Yeah. Because you were talking about, you're speaking to some teens and some girls who have challenges meeting Christian boys who are not addicted or not viewing or haven't seen. Yeah. And you were saying like you're really decreasing. It's first of all, it's hard to find a good Christian man, but then again, you're really decreasing your odds if you're looking for one that's never seen, never touched, never experienced pornography. Can you talk about that as well?
Yeah, and I wouldn't necessarily set that as a standard for women. Like if he's ever looked at it, he's off the table. Like no, it's like okay, maybe he was introduced to this garbage when he was in 7th grade or 8th grade, found his dad's for his older brothers. It was through no fault of his own. And then he got hooked for a couple of years and he's been fighting. The question is, what's the trajectory of that fight? Is he really making progress? Has he owned it instead of blaming it? And like, I'm trying to get out of it. Okay. Is it that you couldn't be trying anymore? You could be trying less. And so the question is, are you still in the midst of this? And if a guy's still hooked on, he's got no business dating. He just simply doesn't. And I know that's a hard line to draw, but it's like, you can't ask a woman to commit to you unless you are actually prepared to be faithful to her. And I've just been exhausted by how many emails I get from wives who got married thinking, oh, it's going to go away. Oh, it's going to get better. And now they are 10 years deep into marriage, and she'll still find his junk on TikTok or Instagram, whatever, and the kids find it. And she's just devastated. And it's like, no. As a single man, like, you got to go through that warrior phase, and I've got to fight the dragon. I've got to cut its head off, walk over its corpse, and enter into the kingdom. Because if you don't, you're just kind of like poking at it, and then you just think it'll stay away, and you go into the castle and like begin your kingdom. He's just going to follow you in there and just burn the whole thing down and kill the both of you. So you realize, okay, this is the battle that I've got to fight to become worthy of the woman that I really want. Because, I mean, you really want to be here in 5 years, in 10 years, some 38-year-old guy still having an erotic moment with your laptop, and you're afraid to initiate love because you might get rejected. It's like, no, like, if you can't get it done alone, which very few guys can, you got to find accountability. Like, we need a brotherhood, a network, a spiritual director. Yes. We need accountability software. The tools are there, but it all starts with the vulnerability of telling someone, hey, this is an area I struggle in. Like, could you help me? And then you can start making progress. I've had guys tell me, I've tried everything in the world, and you're the first person I've ever told this to. It's like, if you've tried everything, you've missed the most important thing, which is transparency with people who actually love you that can help you to break free.
So good. The quote you had mentioned, and I don't want to butcher it. You know it. You said something with C.S. Lewis and how I don't know if this was directed towards exactly where, but if C.S. Lewis and a harem, like an imaginary harem, or
he's talking about essentially what we're doing is keeping an imaginary harem of brides. You know, where your selfishness is never tested, where your ego is never questioned, you know, and it becomes a prison. But he says the danger comes in learning to love the prison. And it's like, whoa. And this, to me, is the root of why I find so many Christian young adult women come to me and say, look, I'm just looking for a good guy. I want to start my vocation. I want to start a family. But like, the guys just aren't here. And it's kind of hard to explain to them that, you know, last century, especially, China had this one-child policy where they're basically just aborting tens of millions of babies, predominantly females. Because if you can only have one baby, you want to have the male, pass on the family name, take care of you financially when you get older. And so women were disproportionately aborted to the tune of like 10 or 20 million compared to the guys. Now these guys have reached the marriageable age, and they're looking for wives, and they're physically not there because they were aborted. Now, what happened in China to me has happened in the Western culture, but only its pornography has aborted a generation of males. Physically, he's there. He is 28 years old, but emotionally, spiritually, he's about 12. He's not ready for his vocation. He's still playing video games. He's still lost in pub and wherever. And these poor women are the casualties of this. It's like a white martyrdom looking for a man who should right now already have a business and 3 kids, you know, and all he's got is credit card debt from the porn. And so we've got to realize what's at stake is your vocation. I think of the movie I saw. I had a long flight once to South Africa, and I'm scrolling through the airline. I'm like, oh, this, you know, I think it was 127 hours, I think was the name of the movie. It was this guy who was hiking in Utah and fell down a slot canyon, and a boulder rolled down and pinned his arm against the cavern wall, and he couldn't get out. It was like 800 pounds. And so he pulled out his knife, and I can cut my arm off. He's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And at this point, he's like just starving to death. He's losing, like, I think he lost like 30 or 40 pounds of weight of dehydration after like days and days. And then he started hallucinating. He's getting close to the point of death. And he saw this vision of like a little boy walking towards him. And he's like, that's my son. But he wasn't married, didn't even have a girlfriend, but he knew if he didn't get out of this hole, his boy wouldn't exist. And so he said, okay, that's it. Ties a tourniquet around his arm, pulls out the knife, severs his arm, fractures the radius and the ulna, and then breaks free, and then gets out of the hole. And then the highway patrol rescues him, and he leaves. At the end of the movie, credits are rolling, and it shows the end, not the actor, but the real man this happened to, sitting on a couch with his wife, his prosthetic limb, and his little boy between them on their laps. And it was like, that's what it took for him to break free. Like, if I don't do whatever it takes to cut this thing out. My whole family will not be. And sometimes that's what it needs to take a guy, that realization. Like an alcoholic, he's about to lose his job because he's told everybody he doesn't have a problem until his boss fires him. And then he realizes, whoa, it's time to get the stuff together.
Yeah, I love that. That's 127 Hours with James Franco.
Okay.
For any note takers out there, it's a great movie. Yeah, that's brutal, especially when he cuts through the nerve.
Ouch.
That's good thing you saw it on a small screen and not a big screen. I do want to highlight to those, especially guys like me, middle-aged, have young families. When someone told me, a friend of mine, this was before I jumped really heavily and headfirst into my faith. I was like, yeah, a bunch of us went to a strip club, and he started yelling at me, and he was like, don't you realize how terrible those are? And I'm like, why? It's so innocent. There's nothing going on. You just go there, you watch and you leave. He was like, that's most likely where a lot of sex trafficking occurs. Mm-hmm. Dude, that blew my mind because my girls were very young at the time.
Yeah.
And then that put things into perspective. I'm like, well, I am not going to participate in that. And then also a lot of that occurs there as they are all mostly sex trafficked. They're not willing participants.
Yeah.
And if you have kids, I mean, that really hits home.
Yeah. And you're fueling the industry by your very presence. You're legitimizing it. But, obviously, even if the woman is so willing and she's just making all this money and she's just living the best life ever, it's like, really? No, she's not. I remember I used to live in San Diego, and when I would drive to Home Depot, I'd always have to pass by this one strip club. It was just on the road. You couldn't avoid it. And there'd always be women sitting outside on like the picnic table, having a smoke between performances or whatever. And, sitting out back of the thing. And I'd always just drive by and just say Hail Mary for them. But like, as the years went, I just kind of got this, I felt like God was like, you need to go talk to them. I mean, these are my daughters. If you don't talk to them, who will? And I just kept putting it off. Like, nope, I'll just pray, whatever. But then one day I was just like, no, today you need to go. And I was just like, nope, not happening. I'm just driving. And then God just kept pressing it on me. So I'm like, okay, God, I'm not going to pull over unless there's only one woman outside, because I don't want some big scene. I don't want the bouncer. I don't want some big thing. And I'm not going to pull over unless I have something to give her. I don't know what to say. And I look over in my passenger side pocket behind the seat was one copy of my wife's book, Pure Womanhood, on how she started over after having a rough, upbringing. And I thought, okay. And I look over and there's one woman sitting at the table. I'm like, okay, here's the day. So I click the blinker and I turn in. I'm like, what if I get in an accident here? Like, Chastity speaker gets rear-ended in strip club parking lot. I'm like, this is not good BPR. But I said, I'm going to do it. And I pulled up and I rolled down the window, and she came over to the car, and I looked into her eyes. And her eyes were like charcoal. Like no one had looked into her eyes for years. They were so busy looking at the body. And I just said, hey, this is a book my wife wrote just for women on how anybody can start over. And I just thought I'd want to give it to you today, and I'll be praying for you. And she was just like, thank you. And it was like looking through the bars of a hostage. And, maybe she wasn't sex trafficked. Just would hope she would not be. But even, if she's there on her free consent, like, this is not what a woman aspires to. This is a place of total resignation and numbness. Like, this is like a 3rd-degree burn that you would allow yourself to be used by that and be like, oh, it doesn't hurt. Oh, it doesn't hurt because the nerve endings have been charred from so much hurt in your life. But we've got to be able to see the woman instead of just being distracted by the body. So the whole solution is to love the women in porn. That's the whole answer. We have to rise up and love them.
I know we're coming up on time here, Jason. Any bits of advice for men to break that addiction, or to even acknowledge that they have an addiction?
Yeah, well, one, the principal spirit that the evil one will try to tempt you with after a fall is discouragement. That's the main spirit. This is not just a mood. This is an evil spirit that you need to name, to rebuke, and to renounce the spirit of discouragement. When trying to fight it, you're going to experience other spirits, the spirit of sloth, of achadia, which is the sadness arising from the realization that what is good is also difficult. That's sloth. It's a spiritual sadness. You realize, there's something good and noble there by killing this porn habit, but that's really hard because it's been a companion to me for so long. when I'm bored and lonely and angry and stressed and tired, I just go
Mhm.
to it. It's like my go-to. What would I do
Mhm.
without it? And you retain an affection for that particular sin. But what ends up happening is you become deeply effeminate. Aquinas defines effeminacy is when a man refuses to let go of what is pleasurable in order to do what is arduous, good, and difficult. It makes a man deeply, he might be very machismo on the outside, but he's a
Mhm.
deeply effeminate man who's retained a disordered affection for pleasure instead of being willing to do what's hard. And this is
Mm.
why what does is like when we're born as men, like we're conceived in a woman's body. And as soon as we're born, we're brought immediately back to the woman's body for
Mhm.
nourishment, for comfort, for warmth. Um,
Mhm.
but as we're weaned from that gradually, we grow in source of independence and strength that we could become a source of strength to the woman. Now, what porn does though is it
Mhm.
retards the whole process of masculine development. That now that I'm bored, lonely, angry, stressed, tired, I'm in a moment of desolation, I run back to the body of the woman to console me instead of
Mhm.
rising up and offering her my strength. And so we've got to
Mhm.
realize that the woman is not meant to be my binky. She emotionally
Mhm.
stressed out at work. I'm not entitled to use a woman because I've been such a good boy for several weeks and I need a little bit of an outlet. God never created his daughters to be outlets for us. They were created so that we would actually be guardians of them and to love them and to cherish them as we would do our own daughters, we should do for his as well. And so even if you feel like, man, I've been struggling with this for so long, I don't even know where to start. If you're Catholic, go to confession. If you're not Catholic, at least find an accountability partner. There's really good
Mhm.
counselors that can help because sometimes you're living out of a wound and you're just trying to treat the
Mhm.
symptoms, but that's like trying to
Mhm.
cut the leaves off a weed, or just the flowers off of the dandelion. Like, no, there's a root system, which is often a wound of neglect, of abuse, of hurt, a wound to your masculinity. And you're living, there's lies that have sprouted out of that wound of like, you don't have what it takes, you're not a man, whatever it is.
Mhm.
And then all these little addictions are just the fruit of it. And so we've got to go down to those core wounds sometimes to really nip that stuff in the bud. And then the healing can happen. But don't be afraid of this. Don't give into a spirit of discouragement. Get some accountability. Our website is chastity.com, and we've got tons of stuff on there, hundreds of videos, online accountability programs you can use, internet filter software, like the tools are there. If you go to chastity.com/porn, we've created a whole link with all these resources in one spot, chastity.com/porn, and you can check it out there.
I love that. Man, all this talk is giving me this idea, and it sounds like you would be the guy to lead the charge on this. I have a friend. He carries a coin. How many months, years he's been sober. There should be something for this as well. Well, like you said, we need accountability partners, and I know in the AA program they have that, right?
Yeah.
So this is something that probably doesn't exist, or if it does, it needs more light
Yeah. And
shine on it.
and just so the guys understand, and when it comes to chastity, I heard it once said that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's human connection. And I was like,
Mhm.
whoa, it's
Mhm.
not necessarily about white knuckling it. Like I've gone 3 months, I'm sober. I've gone 6 months, I'm really
Mhm.
sober. It's no, the opposite
Mhm.
of addiction is not sobriety, it's human connection. That's the piece that's missing.
Mhm.
And so if we're going to
Wow.
dive anywhere, a lot of times we'll give into discouragement if we think it's about checking days off a calendar and be like 6 months. And then we start to almost to get self-reliant and, like I'm doing it, but it's like, chastity doesn't even start until you realize you can't do it and that you just need to be carried and that you're weak and but God is in you and he'll complete the good
Mhm.
work that he began in you.
So good. So good. Do you have 2 more minutes
Sure.
for a
Yeah.
burn or bless segment
Yeah.
of the show that I
Okay.
love? It's rapid fire. You say burn or bless, meaning is a positive outlook or this thing's going to crash and burn.
Yeah.
So, all right, I'm going to name a few topics and then you say burn or bless, and then you have an opportunity to expand on any one of these
Okay.
afterwards. Okay. So cohabitation to save rent before marriage.
Burn.
Separate bank accounts as a default in marriage.
Burn. There is no exit.
Weekend trips alone before engagement.
Burn.
Swimsuit pics on your dating profile.
Definite burn.
Opposite sex DMs after marriage for networking.
Oh, bad idea. Oh, I mean, if you're going to do it, just make sure your wife's on the account as well, or your husband as well. Transparency is key.
Speaking of the Coldplay thing, can you talk about that really quick? Like that guy, the astronomer, is now suing the lead singer, Chris
Of Coldplay?
Yeah. Can you imagine not taking accountability and now suing Coldplay?
No, what that couple was given is a severe mercy. That's what you call that.
Yes.
That exposure was a severe mercy that God sometimes will allow us to wound ourselves so that he can heal us. And so, I mean, let's pray for those people, for their spouses, because I mean, they're so raked through the coals, as they should be, whatever, I'm not gonna justify what was done there, but like, imagine that woman, that man, going to bed that night and with the internet exploding, and the next week, can I even go into public? Do I need to change my facial appearance? Like, I'm surprised they haven't taken their own lives because the amount of scrutiny and mockery and, but I mean, everybody can sit up like, oh yeah, you guys are horrible and evil. It's like, dude, you know what? Infidelity is in my heart. And it's so easy for me to just portray you as the demon. Like, you are so evil, when God is like, how about the fidelity of your heart, Jason? Of your imagination, of your eyes, when you go to the gym, like, are you truly faithful to your bride? Because it's so easy to go TMZ on all these other people because their shame has become so public. But in the innermost recesses of my heart, the little hidden movements, how much of that is pure fidelity? God wants to get in there and purify it too. And so, before we start chucking any rocks, we've got to look into, okay, am I one to cast the first stone? I've been faithful to my wife. I've never touched another woman, but God's still at work in my heart as well. So let's pray for those people who have been
100%.
exposed, that they would receive this as the medicinal hydrogen peroxide from heaven to be able to draw them close back to him.
Yeah, 100%. No, thanks for shedding the light on that. And I thought the same thing, that, that these folks should be on some type of self-deletion like watch out. They should be make sure that they're taking care of themselves because, and like you said, spouses, family members, everybody should be being taken care of and watched as well, just to make sure they're emotionally supported.
Yeah, because especially that the people that unfaithful couple, the ones that were pictured up on that skybox, right now the devil is going to want them to identify themselves by their sin. I remember a priest who said, God knows your sins, but he calls you by your name. The devil knows your name, but he calls you by your sins. Wow. And so those two people, when we see them, everyone thinks sinners, cheaters, like that is who you are. You are your faults. But that's really how the devil views these, whereas God is like, this is my beloved son and daughter, who, yes, made a horrible mistake and probably a whole series of them leading up to that moment. But I'm calling them back into intimacy with them. And it doesn't help when the whole world treats them like they don't even deserve to exist. And so, that we should intercede and pray for them, and obviously for their family members, for their spouses, who I'm sure are going through equal amounts of their own suffering.
Oof, that was good. We use our burn or bless time here, but I do want to ask you one last question. What's the best way people could reach you? So I have one more question after that.
Well, chastity.com. Our social media is Instagram.com/Jason Evert. Same thing with YouTube /Jason Evert, X Jason Evert. So you can connect through all those social media channels at chastity.com. We also have a ministry called jp2trails.com, where we do wilderness backpacking retreats for young adults to help them get their vocation started as well, while learning the writings of John Paul II.
I love it. I love it. And your recent episode with Matt Fred was fantastic. So I'm going to probably link to that episode as well. It was so good. It was such a deep dive on a lot of your topics.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm heading down there for the next interview with him in about 2.5 weeks. We're going to do another 3-hour conversation. So.
Oh, so good. It was so good. I'm glad you guys took a break because how do you sit for 3 hours without a, bathroom break?
Oh, he's done 5-hour ones. I don't know how they manage those things, but.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy. But last question for you, Jason. And thank you for being here, brother. Do you ever wonder if teens saw this 7-hour line while you were in New York, thinking that, and they just wandered into the line thinking it was some rock star at the end and not a chastity speaker?
No, what you're mentioning, for those who aren't familiar with it, after the chastity talks I give, I just tell the kids afterwards, hey, if you guys got any questions or you just need someone to listen, I'll just kind of be over there. And, I gave that invitation to high school in New York. The kids formed a line 7 hours long. And not predominantly because they wanted great advice, I think, but because they knew I would listen to them. And because one of the deepest desires of the human heart is just to be seen in love. And so many of them feel so exposed, online and social media, but invisible at the same time. And to have actually someone see the junk that you're going through and your parents screaming and, the struggle you're having with your sexual identity and sexual abuse, just all the horrors of what these kids have gone through, for someone just to be present to them, that explains the 7-hour line and why we even had to cut the line short to get to the next talk on time. And so this happens, everywhere we go. The kids are just starving. And so I think God wants to rise up people to help feed them with the truth.
That's great. I love the idea of people waiting to speak to you for 7 hours instead of waiting 7 hours for the next iPhone.
Yeah.
Way more fulfillment and knowledge from you. And it reminds me of the story you also told where a kid handed you a illustration of fire coming out of your ears.
Yeah.
Well, that was a good one.
Yeah. And he was explaining what all this stuff meant. And I'm like, what's the fires blowing out of my ears? And he just said, well, you hear us. And I was like, dang, that's the best compliment I've ever gotten. Not I give a nice talk, but I hear him.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you for doing the Lord's work, brother. We appreciate you so much. Thanks for being on the show. And talk soon.
Thank you.
If you were inspired or you learned something new today, please give us a like or a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel. If you want to learn more about how to build your YouTube channel, your personal brand or podcast, hit us up at info@onairbrands.com. That's info@onairbrands.com so that we can find ways that we can help you. I'm Erik, and I hope that I added value in your life today.